My girlfriend said, "I need space. Let's just be friends." I replied, "Sure." Then I removed her name from joint subscriptions, reclaimed her car keys, and changed our Netflix password. 72 hours later, she was knocking desperately on my door. I, 29M, never thought 3 years of my life could be dismissed with such casual cruelty. The words hit me like a freight train last Friday evening when my girlfriend of 3 years sat me down in our shared apartment and delivered what she probably thought was a gentle breakup speech. She told me she needed space, that our relationship had run its course, and that maybe we could just be friends instead. The way she said it, so matter-of-factly while scrolling through her phone, made it clear this wasn't a discussion. It was a verdict. I looked around our apartment, the place we'd decorated together, where we'd planned our future, where I'd been paying 70% of the rent because she was building her savings. The irony wasn't lost on me that she wanted space in the very place I was subsidizing. I told her, "Sure, no problem." The calmness in my voice surprised even me. She seemed relieved, maybe even a little disappointed that I didn't beg or make a scene. She mentioned she'd already made plans to stay at her friend's place for the weekend to give us both time to adjust to this new dynamic. As she packed her weekend bag, chattering about how mature we were being about this whole situation, something crystallized in my mind. If she wanted to just be friends, then she should be treated like any other friend. And I certainly didn't provide premium boyfriend benefits to my regular friends. The moment her Uber pulled away, I got to work. First, I opened my laptop and systematically went through every subscription and service that had both our names on it. Netflix, Spotify Premium, Hulu, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime. All the entertainment subscriptions she binged daily. I methodically removed her access from each one. The gym membership we shared? I downgraded it back to individual. The premium meal kit service that delivered to our apartment twice a week? Canceled entirely. Next, I gathered all the extra keys she'd accumulated over the years. The spare car key to my Honda, the mailbox key, the storage unit key, and most importantly, the spare key to my apartment. I'd given her these gradually as our relationship deepened, each one representing a new level of trust and commitment. Now they felt like evidence of my own naivety. The car situation required more thought. Technically, it was registered in my name. I'd bought it 2 years ago when her old car died, and she'd promised to help with payments. Those promised payments had materialized sporadically at best. She'd been driving it daily, treating it like her personal vehicle while I took public transport to work more often than not. I drove to her friend's apartment complex and parked the car in visitor parking. I left the keys under the mat with a simple note explaining that since we were transitioning to friendship, I needed my car back for practical reasons. Nothing personal, just logistics. The weekend passed quietly. I spent Saturday reorganizing the apartment, boxing up her belongings methodically. Not maliciously. I was careful with her things, but efficiently. If we were going to be friends, she'd need her own place, and I wanted to make the transition smooth for both of us. Sunday evening, I meal prepped for one person for the first time in years. It felt strange, but oddly liberating. I'd forgotten how much money I actually had when I wasn't subsidizing someone else's lifestyle. Monday morning brought the first crack in her composure. She texted me asking why Netflix wasn't working. I explained that I'd updated our shared subscriptions to reflect our new friendship status. She responded with several question marks and a phone call that I let go to voicemail. In her voicemail, she sounded confused and slightly irritated. She asked me to call her back so we could discuss this like adults. I texted back that there was nothing to discuss. I was simply adjusting our arrangements to match our new relationship status. Friends don't typically share premium subscriptions, after all. Tuesday escalated quickly. She'd apparently tried to drive to work and discovered the car situation. Her texts became increasingly frantic. She demanded to know where her car was, and I calmly reminded her that it was actually my car, which I needed back now that we were no longer in a relationship. I told her where she could find it and wished her luck with alternative transportation. She called me selfish and cruel. She said I was being petty and that this wasn't what she meant when she said she wanted to be friends. I found this fascinating. Apparently, her version of friendship involved me continuing to provide all the financial and practical benefits of a relationship while she enjoyed the freedom of being single. I told her I was confused by her reaction. I explained that I was treating her exactly like I treated all my other friends, with respect and kindness, but without the intimate privileges that come with a romantic relationship. If she wanted something different, then perhaps we weren't actually friends after all. Wednesday morning, she showed up at my workplace. This surprised me because it required her to take 2 buses and a train, a journey she'd never made before because she'd always had access to my car. She looked exhausted and frustrated. She cornered me during my lunch break and demanded we talk. She said I was being unreasonable and vindictive. She accused me of punishing her for being honest about her feelings. I listened calmly and then asked her to explain how expecting equal treatment made me vindictive. I pointed out that when she wanted the benefits of a relationship, shared expenses, shared resources, shared responsibilities, I was her boyfriend. But when it came to commitment, future planning, and emotional investment, suddenly she needed space and wanted to be just friends. I told her she couldn't have it both ways. She argued that I was being too literal, that I knew what she meant when she said friends. I asked her to clarify exactly what she meant because I was genuinely confused. Did she mean friends with benefits? Friends where only I provide benefits? Friends where we live together platonically while I subsidize her lifestyle? Her inability to answer clearly told me everything I needed to know. That evening, she tried a different approach. She texted me asking if we could meet for coffee to discuss our situation more calmly. I agreed, curious to see what her next strategy would be. At the coffee shop, she seemed to have regrouped. She apologized for her reaction over the past few days, saying she understood that I was hurt by the breakup. She suggested that maybe we could work out a gradual transition that would be less jarring for both of us. I asked her what she had in mind. She proposed that perhaps she could stay in the apartment for another month while she looked for a new place. She offered to help with the car payments like she'd originally promised, and suggested we could keep the shared subscriptions until she got her own account set up. It was a reasonable-sounding proposal, delivered with the kind of sweet tone she used to use when she wanted something. But I could see through it now. She wasn't offering compromise. She was trying to negotiate a better deal on the same fundamental arrangement where I provided and she received. I told her I appreciated her coming to talk to me, but that I was comfortable with our current arrangement. I explained that I'd learned a lot about myself over the past few days, particularly about my tendency to be overly generous in relationships. I said that her request for friendship had actually been a gift because it helped me establish healthier boundaries. Her face changed when she realized I wasn't going to be manipulated back into subsidizing her lifestyle. She accused me of never really loving her, saying that if I had, I wouldn't be able to cut her off so easily. I told her that was where she was wrong. I had loved her, genuinely and deeply. But love without respect isn't sustainable, and her assumption that I would continue providing for her while she explored other options showed a fundamental lack of respect for me as a person. She left the coffee shop angry, but I felt lighter than I had in months. Thursday brought a new development. Her friend, the one she'd been staying with, called me. She apologized for getting involved, but said she felt I should know what was really going on. Apparently, my ex had been planning this breakup for weeks, possibly months. She'd been setting up dates through apps and had already been seeing someone casually. But more importantly, she'd assumed I would be so heartbroken that I'd let her keep all the conveniences of our relationship while she explored her options. Her friend said she'd been shocked by my practical response and had spent the past 4 days complaining about how cruel and calculated I was being. The friend admitted that she was getting tired of hosting someone who spent all day complaining instead of making actual plans for her future. She warned me that my ex was planning to show up at the apartment that evening to retrieve her things and would probably try to manipulate me into letting her stay. I thanked her for the heads up and spent Thursday evening preparing. I had all of my ex's belongings neatly packed and ready to go. I'd even rented a small U-Haul trailer and parked it outside to make the moving process easier. Friday evening, exactly 1 week after she'd asked for space, she showed up at my door. But instead of the confident woman who'd dismissed 3 years of our relationship, she looked desperate and exhausted. She immediately started apologizing, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and that she wanted to work things out. She said she missed me and missed us, and that she was willing to do whatever it took to rebuild our relationship. I listened patiently and then asked her what had changed her mind. Was it missing our emotional connection? Our deep conversations? Our shared dreams and plans? She stumbled through an answer about realizing how good we were together and how much she valued what we had. But I could see the truth in her eyes. She missed the convenience. She missed having her rent subsidized, her transportation provided, her entertainment funded. She missed the comfortable life I'd built for her, not the relationship itself. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that I was actually grateful for her original decision. This week had shown me how much of myself I'd lost trying to keep her happy. I'd been so focused on being the perfect provider that I'd forgotten to expect mutual effort and respect. She offered to start paying her fair share of expenses, to get her own car, to contribute more to our household. But these weren't romantic gestures. They were basic adult responsibilities that she was finally offering to meet only because her alternative had fallen through. I explained that I couldn't go back to a relationship built on her convenience rather than her genuine desire to be with me. I told her that someone who truly wanted to be with me wouldn't need to lose all their benefits before realizing my worth. She broke down then, crying and begging me not to give up on us. She admitted that she'd been taking me for granted and promised she would change. She said she'd been scared of commitment, but realized now that she wanted to build a future with me. It was heartbreaking to watch, but I'd already learned too much about both of us to go backward. I'd learned that I was capable of much more than I'd been settling for, and that she was capable of much less than I'd been crediting her with. I helped her load her belongings into the trailer with the same care I'd shown all week. I told her I hoped she found what she was looking for, and that I was grateful for the lessons our relationship had taught me. As she drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement about my own future. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since that final conversation, and I wanted to share what's happened since then because the situation took some interesting turns. The first week after she moved out was remarkably peaceful. I'd expected to feel lonely or regretful, but instead I felt energized. I started cooking elaborate meals for myself, something I'd stopped doing because she preferred ordering takeout. I rearranged the apartment to suit my taste instead of compromising on everything. Small changes, but they added up to feeling like I was living my own life again. Then her friend contacted me again. She said my ex had been staying on her couch for 2 weeks and was becoming increasingly difficult to live with. Apparently, the casual relationship that had motivated the breakup had fizzled out quickly once the guy realized she was actually available and came with baggage. More interesting was what her friend told me about the financial situation. My ex had apparently never realized how much of her lifestyle I'd been subsidizing. When she had to get her own phone plan, her own streaming services, her own transportation, and pay full rent somewhere, she discovered that her income barely covered her basic expenses, let alone the comfortable lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. She'd been asking mutual friends about me, trying to gauge whether I was dating anyone or seemed open to reconciliation. Her friend warned me that she was planning another approach, probably with a more sophisticated strategy this time. I appreciated the warning, but I was more focused on something else I'd discovered. Without the constant drain of supporting someone who took that support for granted, I had significantly more money available. I'd started investing, opened a high-yield savings account, and even began looking at condos I might be able to buy on my own. The revenge wasn't in being cruel to her. It was in discovering how much better my life could be without someone who only valued me for what I provided. Update 2. Last weekend brought the sophisticated strategy her friend had warned me about. My ex showed up at my apartment on Saturday morning with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery, something she'd never bothered to remember when we were together. She looked different. She'd clearly put effort into her appearance and was wearing the dress I'd always complimented her on. She asked if we could talk, saying she'd been doing a lot of thinking and wanted to apologize properly. I let her in, curious about this new approach. She'd prepared what was obviously a rehearsed speech about personal growth and self-reflection. She talked about how the time apart had helped her realize her mistakes and how much she'd taken me for granted. She said she'd been selfish and immature, but that losing me had forced her to confront her flaws. It was a good speech. If she'd delivered it 3 months earlier, it might have worked. But I'd spent the past month discovering who I was without her constant demands on my time, money, and emotional energy. I'd remembered what it felt like to have goals that weren't centered on keeping someone else happy. I told her I was glad she'd gained some self-awareness and that I hoped it would help her in future relationships. She asked if there was any possibility of us trying again, promising that things would be different this time. I explained that the problem wasn't whether she would change, it was that I already had. I'd learned to value myself enough to want a partner who chose me enthusiastically from the beginning, not someone who only appreciated me after losing access to what I provided. She tried to argue that all couples go through rough patches and that our history should count for something. I agreed that our history mattered. It had taught me exactly what I didn't want in a future relationship. What struck me most was that even in her apology, she focused primarily on what she'd lost rather than what she'd put me through. Her regret seemed centered on her own discomfort rather than genuine remorse for how she'd treated me. After she left, I felt a profound sense of closure. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd finally learned to prioritize my own well-being over someone else's comfort. Update 3. It's been 2 months now, and I'm writing this final update because the situation has come full circle in a way that feels worth sharing. I ran into my ex at a mutual friend's birthday party last weekend. She was there with someone new. Apparently, she'd found another generous guy willing to subsidize her lifestyle. I watched her operate with the same charming helplessness that had once made me feel needed and protective. But instead of feeling jealous or vindicated, I felt genuinely sorry for both of them. Sorry for him because he was about to learn the same expensive lessons I had. Sorry for her because she was still seeking validation through what others could provide rather than developing her own independence and self-worth. She tried to talk to me privately, saying she hoped we could really be friends now that enough time had passed. I realized that I genuinely wished her well, but that friendship wasn't possible. Not because I harbored resentment, but because we were fundamentally incompatible people who had different values about relationships and mutual respect. The real revelation came when several people at the party commented on how different I seemed: more confident, more decisive, more content. I realized that my response to the breakup hadn't been about punishing her for leaving. It had been about finally setting boundaries that reflected my actual worth. The revenge, if you could call it that, was living well. It was discovering that I was capable of much more happiness and success when I stopped accepting crumbs from someone who should have been offering a full partnership. I've started dating again, but with completely different standards. I'm looking for someone who's excited to contribute to a shared life, not someone who's looking for a comfortable situation. I'm seeking partnership, not dependence. The most important thing I learned is that when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. When my ex said she wanted space and friendship, she was telling me that I wasn't worth fighting for as a romantic partner. My mistake wasn't in accepting that. It was in accepting it for so long before she finally said it out loud. The boundaries I set weren't cruel or vindictive. They were simply honest. If we were going to be friends, we would be actual friends, with the same expectations and limitations I had with everyone else in that category. Looking back, I'm grateful for how everything unfolded. Her request for space gave me permission to finally prioritize my own needs. Her assumption that I would continue providing for her while she explored other options showed me exactly how she viewed my value in her life. The best revenge really is living well. Not because you're trying to make someone jealous or regretful, but because you finally understand that you deserve better than settling for someone else's convenience. I hope she finds what she's looking for, and I hope her new relationship teaches them both something valuable about genuine partnership. As for me, I'm too busy building the life I actually want to spend much time thinking about the one I settled for. Sometimes the trash really does take itself out. You just have to be strong enough not to chase after it when it's gone.